city like San Francisco could only exist in modern America. It's both one of the richest cities in the world, and yet one of the poorest, home to more than 530,000 millionaires, whilst over 600,000 live in poverty alongside them. It's a city of skyscrapers and shantytowns, where technocrats sign billion-dollar deals with companies worth more than the entire UK stock market, all while the rest fight over scraps on the streets below.
726 people died from overdoses in the city.
It is one thing to see what is happening on the streets of the Tenderloin, drug dealing, violence, even killing. It is another thing not to be able to look away from it.
Now, San Francisco used to be considered one of the best cities in the US, drawing in millions seeking their fame and fortune, with its iconic Golden Gate Bridge and its connections with Silicon Valley, all while becoming the largest technological hub on the planet. But the question is, why is it so rich and yet so broken? If they have all of this money, the highest wages in the US and the world, the most profitable businesses in the world, in one of the richest states in America, how could it have all of this money and yet be so societally broken? Well, in this video, we're going to answer this question. And to do this, we'll start off by looking at how the city became the wealthiest place in the world, because only then can we understand why the city is so deeply broken. You see, San Francisco has gone through 4 booms, each of which has helped it become larger and wealthier. The first was the gold rush, which began in 1849. It turned San Francisco from a tiny village to a small town, which only grew more when the Transcontinental Railroad linked the previously isolated state of California with the rest of the US 20 years later. The second happened after World War II, when San Francisco's colossal harbor brought in skilled workers from across the US and beyond, expanding the population dramatically and growing San Francisco into a city and a county of its own. The third came with the dot-com revolution that began in the mid-1990s. Silicon Valley was just a stone's throw away, and it attracted investors, engineers, scientists, and entrepreneurs from around the world to the neighboring San Francisco. Subsequently, the demand for new housing and office space has shot up. By 2000, the population of San Francisco's metropolitan area reached 3.2 million people. Even though the dot-com boom ended in 2000, after overinvestment caused the bubble to burst, with $1.75 trillion going down the drain almost overnight, it wasn't long before the fourth boom began. And it's by understanding this boom that we can understand modern San Francisco today. When social media began to take off, San Francisco once again became a favorite location for tech companies and a common place to live for people employed by Silicon Valley's new resident giants, like Apple and Google. Now the San Francisco Bay Area ranks as one of the wealthiest metropolitan areas, home to the highest number of millionaires in the world. It's filled with the most intelligent minds behind Meta, Twitter, Google, Apple, Uber, any big tech company that you can think of. And because of all the high salaries these people get paid, the average salary in San Francisco is extortionate. Money is flowing everywhere in the city. So much so that the city alone, excluding its metropolitan area, has a $250 billion GDP, all within just a fairly mid-sized city. To put that into perspective, that's the equivalent to the GDP of New Zealand. But before we continue, I want to tell you about our video sponsor. Today, I'm excited to talk about a unique financial product that can help secure your future, Index Universal Life Insurance, or IUL. So what exactly is IUL insurance? Well, it's a 2-in-1 product that combines life insurance coverage with the potential for cash value growth based on the performance of a selected stock market index. First up, it offers death benefit protection, which means financial security for your loved ones if anything happens to you like regular life insurance. One of the unique features is cash value accumulation. Your policy can grow over time based on the stock index performance, but don't worry, your money is protected from market crashes with a guaranteed downside protection. Another great benefit is the flexibility in premium payments. You can adjust your payments based on your financial situation, which makes it super adaptable to your needs. And if you need access to cash, no problem. You can take policy loans and withdrawals from the cash value of your policy when you need it tax-free. Choosing the right insurance policy is a big personal decision, and IUL insurance offers a balance of protection and growth potential, making it a smart choice for many people. If you want to learn more about how IUL insurance can benefit you, check out the link in the description to request more information from a professional consultant. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out in the comments or contact the company directly via their website, riseinsuranceservices.com. Stay tuned for more tips on securing your financial future. And this sounds great. When you see the Golden Bridge, you see that all these big tech companies, all the American dream is happening here, you think it's a golden place, nestled in the woods of California. But when you go there, and you walk along the streets, you'll be shocked at what you see, as the gap between its record number of resident millionaires and the extreme poverty of many of its people is absolutely staggering. I even went there myself, and just walking along the streets in downtown, next to the X-Office, where a bunch of tech companies are based, are littered with abject poverty. You see, the city's image of success and wealth is getting replaced by high crime rates, drug use, and homelessness. And as soon as you go there, you can see it everywhere. It's a really sketchy place. These interlinked problems have created a new kind of inner city ghetto, with open drug markets operating right out in the open. Now, San Francisco has always had a problem with crime. In the gold rush era, it didn't only attract prospectors. The then small town witnessed over 1,400 murders as people fought over their newly found fortunes. And today it's a similar situation, but that isn't really the full story. Fast forward to today, and after the financial crisis started to bite, 50 cases of murders were reported in 2011 alone. And from 2014 to 2017, non-violent robbery incidences surged to nearly 75,000. Soon after, crime levels did drop, but not for long. Since 2020, despite dropping overall slightly last year, crime has skyrocketed back to 2017 levels, especially when it comes to violent crimes like burglary and theft. In fact, the chances of getting your property stolen have escalated to such an extent that in some neighborhoods, it's become impossible for small businesses to sustain themselves. Stores are actually being forced to change their operating hours to avoid getting robbed. In fact, it's getting so bad that in Oakland, right next to San Francisco, In-N-Out Burger historically actually shut down, the first time in its entire company history, all because it was just too dangerous to operate. So many small businesses have been hit so hard by robberies and people avoiding the streets at certain times that so many have had to close down. When you walk along San Francisco, you can see all these boarded up shops, abandoned malls, trash littered everywhere, with an uneasy feeling hanging in the air. And you can see why. I mean, in broad daylight, people will just walk into stores and take whatever they like. Because in San Francisco, there is now a rule, you can quite literally shoplift up to $950 worth of stuff without getting any criminal charges. And the minimum wage employees at big brand stores really don't care, but when it's small businesses that are targeted, this truly does become reprehensible, especially at the government level that allows this to happen with all of the money they still have, money that could be used to solve San Francisco's issues. But as you'll quickly see throughout this video, there's a very strong reason why this isn't being fixed. You see, crime doesn't spring out of nowhere, and while the explosion in 2010s can be traced to the 2008 financial crisis, it still doesn't explain that why since COVID has crime gotten so bad in San Francisco. Well, one of the reasons might be drugs. We've all seen the videos of zombies walking around online, completely drugged out of their mind in San Francisco. It's a really shocking sight to see. Although San Francisco is famous for Haight-Ashbury and being the home to all these musicians taking drugs, the situation now is truly dystopian. In 2023, the average overdose rate in the US per 100,000 people was 2, and California's was 2.3, but in San Francisco, it was a massive 6.1. According to CDC data, in 2022 alone, more than 70,000 people fell victim to fentanyl, and between 2015 and 2020, the number of deaths it caused in San Francisco increased by 4,600%, and that was after dropping to 649 deaths in 2022. But a year later, it rose to 810. And it looks like in 2024, this will be a record-breaking year, as within just a few months of the year, 327 people had already lost their lives to drugs just in San Francisco alone. And it's not hard to see why. When you walk around, you see it everywhere. Open drug use is rampant on the streets, and yet when you look up, you see all these adverts for the big new tech companies and venture capital funding. According to San Francisco Standard, Tenderloin, one of the worst hit areas in San Francisco, had 821 reported drug offenses between August 2018 and August 2019. In that same period up to 2023, the number is now 1,013, and in almost all other areas of San Francisco, this figure is doubling too. And this is just reported drug crimes. But as you'll see when you go to San Francisco, there's hardly any police around. It almost feels completely lawless, which arguably it is. As you walk along San Francisco, it's so disturbing to see all these expensive apartments, these crazy high salaries and crazy high prices all around, while drugged out zombies and homeless people walk around at complete rock bottom, with absolutely no police around and no help for these people. But just as crime doesn't live in a vacuum, neither does drug use. Most people only turn to drugs, or even become homeless, when either things are wrong in their lives and the system itself is broken. You see, there's a link between crime, drugs, and homelessness. Those same neighborhoods that have high rates of violent crime and drug use also have extreme levels of homelessness. You see, San Francisco is the third highest rate of homelessness in the US, only beaten by two other Californian cities, Los Angeles and Oakland. Oakland being right next to San Francisco, it's almost the same place. Out of 650,000 people experiencing homelessness nationwide in 2023, 7,500 were just in the city of San Francisco alone, which is nearly 1% of the nation's total homeless population. And yet at the same time, the city only has 0.25% of the nation's total population, which means San Francisco has 4 times more homeless people than the average city in America. And more troubling still, in just the last 2 years, San Francisco's homeless population has risen by 7.3%. Whether drug use is causing homelessness or homelessness is leading to drug use is hard to say, but there is evidence that a lot of those living on the streets aren't there just because of substance abuse. You see, with all of this money coming in, all these giant companies, the hundreds of billionaires living here, and the extremely high-paid employees for said companies, make San Francisco one of the most expensive places to live in the world. Major cities like Dublin, London, Paris, Barcelona, Miami all have incredibly high rents. However, they all pale in comparison to San Francisco. Now, there are several reasons for this, primarily the high cost of housing. It stands to reason that high housing prices don't just appear out of nowhere. They usually occur when supply is much lower than demand, which is certainly the case in San Francisco. Austin, Texas, which has a population similar to San Francisco, has built 133 new homes since 2010. Meanwhile, San Francisco has managed to build only 37,000. On top of the enormous high pay that people have to be there, this has caused both rent and house prices to skyrocket. But it's getting now to a critical point where only one home has been built for every 8 new jobs created in the last decade. Today, a minimum wage worker would need 5 full-time jobs to afford a 2-bedroom flat in the city. It's these pressures that are decimating San Francisco's middle class, and the pandemic only made things so much worse. Because throughout the pandemic, it was estimated permanent remote work more than doubled, surpassing that of any other city in the world. Especially because of all the tech jobs in San Francisco, people can just program from home. But at the same time, they'd still need to be in the city to pop in, go to conferences, and network with other people in the industry, leading to a situation where the apartment you're staying in is of critical importance. It becomes people's entire office. And with these incredibly high-paying jobs, people have more disposable income to spend on a nice condo, completely gentrifying huge parts of the city and making the only places affordable for regular people almost completely out of reach. It's a problem that other cities in the US are facing right now too, but nowhere is it as bad as San Francisco. With all the trillions on its doorstep, there should be easily enough tax money to solve these problems, but as we'll soon find out, there is a huge reason nothing has gotten better. One issue is that the San Francisco government has no interest to help at all. In fact, while trying to find solutions to all of these problems, new political strategies look like they've just made things worse. Upon taking office in 2020, San Francisco's district attorney had a problem. The prison system was under pressure. With all the cracks in society, the huge amount of crime pouring over the city, the lack of money for regular people, the swelling homeless population meant that crime was everywhere, and it was almost impossible to house all of the criminals. Even making small crimes permissible wasn't enough. Trying to solve this, they continued to introduce new policies, promising more and more leniency to those committing minor or non-violent crimes. So if a person got caught red-handed committing a minor crime, instead of facing the consequences, they could then be set free. But this has just been a complete disaster and has only made things so much worse in the city, giving violent criminals the confidence that they wouldn't face the consequences, so they could just continue committing small crimes. And soon, San Francisco citizens are suddenly finding themselves surrounded by swarms of crime all around them, because it's being legitimized. The whole situation is spiraling so out of control that by 2022, it was estimated that a citizen of San Francisco had a 1 in 16 chance of experiencing a violent property crime. Added onto this were some more bizarre policy changes. You see, with all of the taxpayer money they have, from all these giant tech companies and the workers being employed to them, you would think one of the richest cities in the world would be able to tackle all of these issues easily. So how did the government tackle the link between drug use, homelessness, and crime? Well, their decision was to offer free alcohol to homeless people. The idea was that they wouldn't take harder drugs because they didn't need them, and so the violent crime linked to buying those drugs would go down. The policy costs $5 million each year to fund this program, and some critics believe that the program is only making matters so much worse, and that taxpayer dollars shouldn't be used to fund alcoholism. Adam Nathan, chair of the Salvation Army San Francisco Metro Advisory Board, posted to X, "Did you know San Francisco spends $2 million a year on a managed alcohol program? It provides free alcohol to alcoholics who are mostly homeless." He criticized the program, asking why every public health dollar wasn't going towards the prevention and treatment of drug overdoses, or even on proper policing. Our public health department is keeping people sick as opposed to working towards getting them healthy. But there's more to the picture than this. You see, with all of these issues laid out, it's pretty clear that San Francisco has become the most unequal place in the world. The decline has accelerated exponentially over the past decade. We've seen how bad it's gotten today, but what's the real reason behind all of this suffering and chaos? Ever since the rise of Silicon Valley, there have been tensions between the historical population of San Francisco and its much newer and much richer Silicon Silicon Valley workforce. At first, it was hard to blame them for everything. San Francisco's economic problems, its homelessness, and its crime were all shared by other similar cities as well. But today, it isn't hard to see why so many San Francisco natives have diagnosed big tech as the main cause behind the city's decline. The largest problem they've created for the city is economic. With the arrival of big tech came massive salaries. By 2011, there were over 5,000 startups in the city alone, each offering salaries averaging over $100,000 per year. People with regular jobs can compete with tech workers for rents, leading to tons of evictions as people were forced to leave. Many of them ended up on the streets, feeding into the city's other problems. Small businesses couldn't keep up either when tech companies started moving in. When some startup offers your landlord double or triple the rent you're already struggling to pay, it's completely over. Nearly all of the independent cafes, shops, bars, and music venues closed down, replaced by soulless chain coffee shops or yet more office space. People complained, of course. They couldn't stand to watch their city dying slowly in front of their eyes, but it didn't work. The tech giants threw so much money and so many lobbyists at the government that they weren't going to kick them out or even stand up for them. A symbolic issue arose over big tech and their use of the city's bus stops. Every day, the Silicon Valley giants would shuttle all of their employees from the city center into Silicon Valley, clogging up the roads and making the traffic even worse. In the evening, it would all happen again. It made clear to people that their beloved home city had become a lifeless commuter town, and so people protested. But Google and other companies lobbied hard and stacked town hall meetings with their own employees. A leaked memo from Google directed employees to read out sentences like, quote, "I'm so proud to live in San Francisco and be a part of this community." If that wasn't fake enough, how about this one where they actually wanted people to read out, "My shuttle empowers my colleagues and I to reduce our carbon emissions by removing cars from the road." The buses inevitably stayed, and the city would go on to lose every single battle with big tech. Whatever policies they wanted, however stupid, they were passed without thought. All of the taxes that should have fixed the city's problems just went towards making things worse, as we've already seen with the free alcohol for alcoholics policy. Instead of building more houses to relieve at least a little bit of the economic pressure, the money went elsewhere. Crime was ignored instead of punished, making people afraid to leave their homes. Big tech paid so few taxes that it didn't matter how rich they got. The city itself stayed poor. Ironically, even the tech company employees hated the new San Francisco. Even after working their way up to a six-figure salary, they're still living right in the midst of the ghetto. They didn't want any of this, to feel unsafe or get mugged on their way to work. It was the companies and their infiltration of the government that created the mess. Then when COVID hit, big tech didn't even need their domination in the city anymore. Even today, nearly a third of the tech jobs in the city are fully remote. It was all for nothing. Big tech can leave and wash their hands of the whole situation, leaving the city to deal with its massive new problems. With all of these poor government policies compounding and feeding the rise in violent crime rates and the drug use, San Francisco seems to be getting more and more broken by the day, with this entire place spiraling out of control. And if you ever go there, and you'll see what I mean, even Elon Musk admits it next to the X offices. That's why everybody's trying to leave the city now. In 2023 alone, more than 10 multi-billion-dollar companies, including Meta, Twitter, Snapchat, and PayPal, have already exited San Francisco or are in the process of planning their departure. And so with even less taxpayer money coming into the government, it doesn't look like these problems will be fixed anytime soon.